Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing Prodigal Son, Season 2, Episode 4, Take Your Father to Work Day, and what could be better than taking your father to work if your work happens to be where your father's incarcerated at Claremont Psychiatric Hospital. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into the review, shall we? We begin this week's episode with Mr. David bringing Martin breakfast in his private cell at Claremont Psychiatric. We're treated to Martin's daily routine set to a backdrop of Survivor by Destiny's Child and some of Martin's signature wit. We catch up with Martin in therapy group, and he's talking with Dr. Marsh and some of the other inmates, or patients as it were, and when his time to expand on what he's saying gets cut short in favor of another inmate, Jerry, his former cellmate, we find out Jerry's getting released the next day. He goes on and on about his release and how much he wants to eat lobster, much to the chagrin of the other inmates who show visible frustration with his prattling on. Malcolm walks into the family townhouse and says, not sure that an invitation to brunch necessitates a 911 text to his mother Jessica, and is confronted by a strange man who blames Malcolm for ruining the rug in the living room, or parlor as the rich folks call it. Apparently the rug, with all of Endicott's blood on it, was a priceless family heirloom, and Hans is providing options for Jessica to replace it. Hans is the carpet, or the rug man, as it were, to the rich. I thought it was funny when she said, I can't believe my two ne'er-do-well children ruined it. Bright's hand starts to twitch as Hans confronts him about why the rug got ruined. When Bright tells the story, he uses the wine brilliantly as a metaphor for Endicott's blood as they kind of flash back and forth between the scene. Martin is out in the yard on rec time shooting some hoops. Jerry falls to his death off the roof, and Martin casually exclaims, oh no, not Jerry. It was beautiful delivery by Michael Sheen. Then we see Gil making his way to the crime scene, and Martin seems, quote, happy to see him, a sentiment that is visibly not shared by Detective or Captain Arroyo, as it were. Gil blames Martin for it, of course, and they have a little funny back and forth. Martin tells Gil that Jerry didn't commit suicide. Clearly someone who is jealous of his impending freedom killed him, and Martin recalls the atmosphere during group therapy and how Jerry bragged about getting out and devouring a lobster. Idrissa is examining Jerry's corpse, deduces it wasn't a suicide based on the injuries, and Martin yells, thank you, to which Idrissa looks at Gil and exclaims, that's Martin Whitley, and she kind of fangirls out, and Idrissa and Martin compare doctor speak and share a laugh, as Gil looks on in disgust and tells Idrissa that he killed 23 people. Ainsley and Malcolm are discussing Jessica's recent interrogation of Bright regarding what happened to the carpet in the parlor. Bright tells Ainsley that, of course, Jessica's going to perform the Inquisition on you as well. And Bright's phone rings, and she knows it's Gil and wants in on the case for a story. Gil tells Malcolm that the case is at Claremont, which excites Ainsley as we hear Martin yelling in the background, Malcolm, Malcolm, good to work with you, my boy. And I absolutely adore Michael Sheen and all his scene-chewing greatness, even when he's just doing voiceover work. Idrissa, Bright, and Gil are examining Jerry's body once again, and they find out Idrissa's been talking to Martin on the phone the entire time, and he's helping her, and he's helping advise her on possible suspects. Idrissa shows a little jealous side whilst talking about how her ire was raised by a former friend marrying her high school boyfriend and posting wedding pics from the Galapagos Islands, because who hasn't seen a turtle? Gil and Malcolm are talking to Martin in his cell, and Martin wants to know what their plan is, and Gil says, we're not here to talk case strategy, you're a witness, to which Martin quickly snaps back with, why can't we be peers? You've shown so much affection for my son and my wife. Why no love for the man who actually gave you your career? Gil goes to leave. Bright stops him and asks his dad a question about the stress responses by other inmates to Jerry's boasting of his impending release. So Gil agrees to allow Martin to consult with the case, begrudgingly though. This is the genius of Martin's character. Everything he does is calculated and measured. No wasted motion or effort anywhere. Martin throws out 3 of the other inmates' names. He wants Bright to come to his group session, which Malcolm agrees to. Malcolm starts interviewing the group, and it gets turned around as they start to give Malcolm grief about turning in Martin. And Bright says that it was all because he loved his dad until he found a girl in a box. Bright stands up and literally screams at his dad until the inmates open up about Jerry. And Martin gets this sly little smile like they were kind of planning the whole thing out. They tell him that you need a certain key card to gain roof access when Bright questions him about how he got up there in the first place. Martin expertly steers the focus to Dr. Marsh, who leads the therapy sessions, and they start to gently accuse him of having a savior complex and wanting to kill Jerry because he no longer felt needed anymore. And the claim he was upset because Jerry didn't need him, really, you can tell it kind of bothers Dr. Marsh. Bright makes Marsh produce his gold key card to prove that he has one, and then one of the inmates punches Dr. Marsh in the face, and the room gets locked down because Malcolm is evacuated. The inmate punched Dr. Marsh because he was really pissed that they thought he killed Jerry. So Danny Powell, who we're seeing for the first time this episode, and I don't mind, and Gil Arroyo are interviewing Dr. Marsh, and it comes out that he had to get a new gold key card the morning of the murder. And he tells them he lost the previous one, to which Gil calls him out for lying to them. Turns out, Marsh had career aspirations that he was hoping to glean from Jerry's recovery as a means to getting his work published. Jerry agreed to lie and say that Marsh cured him, and Marsh would give him the key card to have access to certain areas of Claremont prior to his release later that day. As Gil and Powell leave Claremont with Marsh in custody, they're greeted by Ainsley and her camera crew, and she asks about Gil taking Marsh into custody as a suspect and asks if it has anything to do with the death of Jerry Chapman. Ainsley is starting to remember what happened the night that Endicott was killed, and she's slowly starting to figure out that she's the one that killed him. Martin is excitedly talking to Malcolm about the case, and Malcolm notices that Martin is staring at the key card that he has in his hand because Malcolm knows that Martin wants out. Malcolm then tells Martin that Ainsley is starting to recall details from the Endicott murder. Powell comes in and tells Malcolm that they have Jerry on tape entering the 4th floor, which is where the female inmates are held. As Powell and Bright arrive at the 4th floor library, Bright finds fingernail scratches on the wall in the library, and he then recalls how Jerry's fingernails were bent back, and Idrissa had discovered the same kind of paint under his nails that was missing from the walls. Malcolm starts questioning the guard Andre about the 4 women who are on the cleaning crew, and Danny is kind of ribbing Bright as his process of elimination Q&A session with Andre goes on, using the women's characteristics and backgrounds lead them to their main suspect, Rhonda, who was from Maine, as they recall Jerry's affinity for lobster because he was adamant about having one immediately upon release. But Bright says he was from the Midwest, so where would he have developed this obsession with lobster? Rhonda is from Maine. Boom, Bright is a genius. And in one of my favorite scenes in this entire episode outside of Bright's Q&A with the guard Andre while Danny watches on, Jessica calls Martin to inquire about Ainsley and Malcolm, and she's asking him about the kids lying to her about what happened to the rug, and she kind of implies that she knows something is wrong with their story. They're too well rehearsed, and she says, well, they remember what year the vintage was they spilled. Is that normal? Martin tells her to ask exactly what she's afraid to ask, and she knows exactly what happened. You can kind of get that sense. Martin proceeds to gaslight her by telling her the true story and then making a joke out of it. You can tell she completely believes him. Ainsley then arrives at Claremont to pay dear old dad a visit in his cell and have a discussion with him about some memory repression. So he sees a lot of himself in Ainsley, I think, is what really draws him to her, as well as Bright. The father-daughter dynamic is a little bit different in this circumstance. Malcolm goes to visit Rhonda in her cell and tells her he wants to talk about Jerry. She's crying and says it's all her fault, and she tells Bright that Jerry was afraid of another inmate who wanted Jerry to help him escape. He goes to confront Martin about it and finds that Ainsley is already there, then accuses Martin of killing Jerry because of course Bright would. Ainsley leaves and threatens to run it as a headline. Malcolm tells Martin that he knows about the escape plan, and they proceed to tear into each other in a shouting match, in which Sheen delivers a monstrous scene-stealing performance. It was fucking amazing. Then, Bright figures out why Jerry died, because a few episodes ago, he was an incomprehensible babbling idiot, and when Martin electrocuted him, it served as a cure. So, he was going to be released, and Rhonda felt scorned as they were involved in a relationship, so her new boyfriend was responsible for Jerry's death. Andre. He was the guard who Bright was getting his intel from on the female inmates during the investigation. This is what we think. Andre was responsible. Now keep this in mind as we move forward. We then see Andre entering Rhonda's cell and they kiss. And then you have to suspend your disbelief because Andre is a big guy and Rhonda just beats him unconscious and steals his taser gun, his key card, his keys. And I said, you really have to suspend your disbelief here because this is literally physically impossible for her to do. I mean, even if she got the drop on him, this is absolutely just a cringe moment, and it kind of goes back to a few of the woke moments from previous episodes. I mean, the scene could have been done much better, but it came across very contrived in my opinion, and it only happened because the plot needed it to. Martin is being taken back to his cell, is being escorted by Bright and Mr. David, but Malcolm and Martin end up in the basement with Rhonda. Malcolm calls Danny to get backup, then goes looking for Rhonda. Martin sees an exit and decides to make a break for it. All this while Bright is hunting Rhonda down with a pipe wrench, but of course, Rhonda gets the drop on Malcolm and tases him repeatedly. Martin hears it and comes back to him, but finds a gold key card first, and he leaves. Doesn't leave the building, but leaves the scene. Powell, Danny, happens upon taser-happy Rhonda, but Martin creeps up behind her, and they leave on a commercial break, and you think that Martin is going to attack Powell, but no, he kind of likes Danny. So Martin approaches Rhonda, tries talking her down, and Rhonda has the taser to Martin's head. But just then, we see, come into frame, Danny has her gun drawn right on Rhonda, and they arrest her. Malcolm takes the key card from his dad, who begrudgingly gives it back to his son, and asks why he's wearing a leather jacket, which he picked up, and Malcolm knows it was because his dad was planning to escape. We cut to Jessica having dinner with Malcolm. She admits that she thought that Bright killed Endicott. She tore her entire house apart and said, "You forgot one thing," and found a splatter of blood on a book. Asks Malcolm what happened to Nicholas, and he says, "I killed him because I was trying to protect the family." And Jessica knows that it was Ainsley. We cut to Ainsley reading Martin's journals, in which he's describing what it feels like to see your victim's blood for the first time. And we get this eerie sense that Ainsley is going to follow in Daddy Dear's footsteps. Malcolm tells Jessica that Ainsley has no idea she killed Endicott, and we see Ainsley crawling into bed with Jessica because she had a nightmare with a mixture of concern and utter horror, and that's where we leave this episode. This was a tremendously entertaining episode. Tom Payne and Michael Sheen completely stole every scene they were in, not even mentioning the ones that they were in together. I think this show has gotten consistently better over the past 4 episodes. And the overarching story of Ainsley's deteriorating mental health, Jessica's growing mistrust of her daughter, Malcolm's paranoia, Martin's desire to save his family, all of this forms a highly compelling story that keeps us viewers coming back for more and more. Not to mention the supporting cast of Lou Diamond Phillips, Danny Powell, JT Tarmel, who is absent again this episode. I'm sure they'll use the explanation that his newborn son is keeping him away from work, and Idrissa, the medical examiner. If you want a psychological police drama that is highly stylized, engaging, and a low level of woke tendencies with some great acting, this is your show right here. I give this one a 4.5 out of 5 this episode. This was probably one of the best episodes I've seen in the 1.25 seasons that this show has been running. It is absolutely wonderful. Be sure to come back tonight, 8:30 Eastern. Join myself, Tony Tonedeaf, as we host Jeff Hicks, Nick Utam from World Class Bullshitters, 8:30 Eastern, right here, Going Rogue, episode 10. Don't miss it, folks. It's going to be a great episode. I'm Etepo Queen of the Place to Be Reviews. I've been here with all of yous. And remember, if I don't see you, have a great day, a pleasant tomorrow, and I'll catch you on the next one.